Okay, let's start the meeting. A little bit, 5 minutes late. All right. So, is everyone good at the minutes here?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay. So Dave, you got an adjustment to the agenda?
Oh, yeah. The committee, appointment reappointments, what was not on there is the energy committee. Didn't have an addition, so we can take that up. We can take that up at the end of the appointments.
So we'll just, can you just add that on to the appointments? Okay. Okay. Is anyone here that for anything other than what's on the agenda? Anything special I should know about? That's good. Thank you. Okay. So we'll start out with the
Public comments and public comments.
yeah, that's what I just asked for. So we'll start out with the road proposal that you. And so, Carol, you can read off again. I guess we've got to make a couple of decisions here. I guess.
Correct. As folks may know, if not, you're new to this idea. The select board has agreed to put together a group of folks to look at the condition of our roads and to come up with a plan and of both maintenance as well as looking into the future of some levels of sort of support, and then pass a report to the board, and the board would make a decision on what level to implement and what budget impacts it has. So I just have a couple of comments in trying to get to keep the development of the project moving along. The membership at this point, as I understand it for the board, we have settled on 2 members, so it would be myself and Gordon. From the Planning Commission, I want to thank Roger for doing the legwork. Jake Wary and David Strauss, who I don't see David here tonight. From working as a citizen of Hartland, Peter Gregory, thank you, Peter, and Nicole Duck will be the second person. And then Dave Ormiston will represent the town and the highway crew, and as needed will involve the highway foreman. So if we're okay with, the board is okay with that grouping, I'd like to sort of move forward.
I have a question.
Sure.
Does Nicole Buck have an engineering background? Because that's what you were looking for.
Yes, she is a civil and a engineer and geologist. She is doing some specialized work for V-Trans right now on culvert design, and she has an interest in, I don't know what the word is, hydrology.
Yeah.
So it seems to, and she's familiar with the pending law change that's coming.
That's great.
So I was a little worried. She's a very busy person representing being on the school board, but she said she has an interest in this work. So
Great.
okay. So I don't know if any board approval.
As long as there isn't any objections.
Sounds great.
Sounds like a good. I don't know whether we want to mention that we might ask someone else to come in for some special reason at times too.
Oh, there's going to be lots of people coming and going.
Yeah.
You know, we're looking at Vermont local roads. We're looking to Two Rivers to talk a little bit about the background survey and where things stand on the upcoming hydraulically connected roads survey. And without looking at my notes, And then we're also talking about having a general meeting with citizens.
Okay.
Okay. One of the things that I did change on the scope of work is the more I read what eventually you'll see are the reference materials, the more I realized that we already know what the baseline is for road maintenance. And so I changed the scope of work to really to use the components of a good road design that are spelled out in the state document that we have we've adapted or adopted and just recently put our signatures to accepting. So the standards are clearly laid out, and really all we're talking about is understanding those standards and then moving forward. So there's a slight change in the scope of work there on the road maintenance pieces. The other piece that I changed is, I added the reference materials. So if you've had a chance to look at it, I'm wondering if you can give me any feedback, and if you haven't, I would welcome feedback for any materials that you think the group could use. I'm also stumbling a little bit. I would like to have concurrently while we're doing this work, I would like to have maybe the Historical Society sponsor a talk on the history of Vermont roads. There's obviously a very rich history, including colonial times and between the British and the French and Revolution, and some of those roads still exist. The fact that roads were toll roads, and then the Great Flood of 27 sort of changed, forced the state to sort of have a hand and change the toll roads around. So I'm looking for just some historical background, which I thought would be fun to have. So if anyone out there has any information, both Gordon and Jay know a gentleman I spoke to yesterday, George Tuttle.
Gordon.
I've said that 3 times now. And I'm still out there looking, so if anyone has any ideas, please let me know. The last thing is kind of frivolous, but I like to think of another name of the group other than task force. I used a thesaurus, and task force came up with commando and all sorts of things like that. And so it's not something we have to worry about tonight, but if anyone has any, is a wordsmith, I would appreciate some help. That's for what I would like to report on, Gordon. That's
That's great. Thanks for doing that.
Any comments?
Sounds good.
Let's see. All right. That's good. We'll move along. Didn't take 20 minutes. So we're going to, we've got the members of the Planning Commission here, and we're going to talk about the floodplain bylaws and building permits. I think we'll switch that order and do the building permits first to accommodating. And yes, Dave?
Yep, no, I was just gonna, go ahead.
Yeah.
Just gonna,
So we'll start with that, and Doug is here and Jay is here. So Dave, you want to introduce that?
yeah, well, let's do a little background as to what brings Peter and here tonight. Just start on the floodplain bylaw. We had mentioned last week we did get a call from the state of Vermont. I reached out to Two Rivers for a little bit of background on this. And then subsequent from that, they did have a yearly or every few years they meet with the planning commission. They met with our planning commission, and floodplain bylaws came up, and the structure of the bylaws and how they're should be activated or followed through on. And then through that discussion with the planning commission, the discussion of building permits came up as well. And this is something that has been kind of been a recurring theme since last fall, late summer, with Doug Linnell coming back, or the listers coming back with some of the development that we're seeing. And we have also seen this kind of in those Mount Escutney meetings that we've been holding. The December one in particular, there was a few planning commission members at that meeting in December, and that's also worked itself into that same discussion at the planning meeting that Two Rivers was at, and they're kind of here to expand on both of them a little bit to the board and on the discussion that they have with the planning commission as well.
Well, I'm Peter Gregory from Two Rivers Outqueechee. I'm glad to be here and be a resource for you guys on both of these issues. I brought Kevin Geiger, senior planner, with me from Two Rivers. He's our resident expert on flood hazard bylaws, and why you have them, and how to administer them, and can talk about different examples and answer your questions on that. So with your permission, I'll turn it over to Kevin just to kind of give an overview, and then I'm sure he'll accept questions anyway through this discussion.
So do you want to do kind of the building side or the flood side first?
Start with the buildings, if you can.
Oh, start with the building side, okay. So as you know, right now, you don't have any zoning regulations outside of your flood regulations. But if you want to capture buildings, there are a variety of ways you could do that. The most simple way is to have some form of a zoning bylaw. They can be, doesn't need to be a great big kind of bylaw, it can be a very small bylaw that just deals with that. Anybody erecting a structure though in town right now that has a sewer, any type of septic system design, needs a state permit for that, as well as if you were expanding an existing structure and adding a bedroom or something like that. So all of those people need to be talking to the state anyways about their structures. The state does not automatically know that they exist. No light goes on in some office telling them a house got built. And people don't necessarily know that they need to talk to the state. And so that's one thing that you and the listers can connect people and go, oh, okay, I see you just put in a structure. You need to have a septic design for that. Go see the regional engineer. So there is an existing mechanism to deal with that outside of whatever you do. Which might be enough for whatever your purposes are. But if you really want to capture, somebody putting up a garage or something, which obviously doesn't have a septic permit, then a straight zoning ordinance along those lines would do it. You may be able to do what they call a Chapter 59 ordinance, which is under your general ordinance authority, which is where you have dog ordinances and noise ordinances and things like that out there. We don't deal with those that much, but we could look into that type of thing for you. But again, a zoning bylaw needn't have all sorts of things in it. You can put all sorts of things in it, but you could have a very, very stripped down version if you wanted to.
With the ordinance, it would be a building ordinance type thing, would be something fairly basic as well, something that can be put together by the town attorney or with the help of Two Rivers.
Yeah, we could make just like the most bare bones thing you could possibly imagine.
As far as what we're seeing here, are there other towns in the area that you've seen that has experienced similar things where there's development occurring, the town just isn't aware of it, perhaps it's falling through the cracks or it's not being picked up by the listers, or they're only doing appraisals every 10, 12 years or something to that effect?
Yeah, we certainly hear from town, we don't hear from the listers so much, but we hear from other towns where they say, gosh, the listers would like to know that this is happening and how can we find out that that's happening? If we don't have, even in some towns that do have a zoning ordinance, because they don't necessarily, again, there's no automatic thing that tells people, oh, you need to come get a permit. So a lot of people forget that sometimes, if you're adding a bedroom, they think, oh, I only need a permit to build a house. Well, maybe that adding a bedroom requires a permit. You need to go tell the town, which listers often want to know. Or you remodeled your kitchen, that type of thing.
Is there a state statute as far as having someone report an addition or for tax purposes to the town?
Not that I know of, not for tax purposes.
Kevin, I was a little confused there. So you're saying that Act 250 would kick in if an addition to a home was simply a bedroom with no septic?
Not Act 250, but a state septic permit.
Okay.
Which are, it's kind of some of the same people involved.
Right.
It's the same thing if somebody's going to create a new lot, even though you don't do subdivision regulations locally, a state subdivision permit is needed for that, which is essentially a potable water supply and wastewater permit.
Okay.
But they're not an Act 250.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't, that just came out to me. So,
Yes.
okay.
And you also, of course, have health authority right now. Your health officer has authority to enter on the property after notice. They don't need permission. They're one of the few people in the state that don't need permission. They just give somebody notice, I'm going to check. In case somebody has done something that's just totally, a homemade job out there, that's not necessarily kosher.
So Kevin, can you expand on that a little bit, on the duties of the health officer, what their ability, if it's not a tenant-landlord situation, what access do they have? So let's just say somebody is dumping in, sewage is going into the river, or there's 30 bags of trash on a front porch, or, just a reasonable health to the public that could be detrimental to the neighborhood or something like that.
Right, so there are two folks who kind of have some safety powers. One's your fire chief and one's your health officer. And I suppose animal control has other things I don't know about. But your health officer and you acting as the Board of Health behind them have pretty amazing powers to basically abate public health problems. So not that somebody is just, unkempt, but that they're actually creating, you got a bunch of trash lying around that's going to attract vermin. You have somebody whose septic is just like, straight piping somewhere, something like that. The obvious health concerns. Fire chief has authority for anything that's a threat of fire. So they might say that structure is just, is in danger of catching on fire, or is so jammed full of things that we're not going to be able to rescue anybody in there, or that type of thing. So they have some authority too. But your health officer is really the one I'd look to. The Department of Health, of course, has some guidance materials around what health officers can and can't do.
Do you know what the health officer would need to enter on or to approach a particular house? Was to say the septic is a little sketchy. I mean, if the listers were to fall upon, for instance, we come in, one of the reasons why this is a topic of discussion is, we've gone out to properties in 2, 3, 4 unlanded mobile homes that popped up on a particular parcel, and it's unclear to the listers as to whether that's going into a shared, septic, whether it's going into the river, whether it's, doesn't exist at all.
Right. And anybody who just, put, for example, a mobile home on a property that wasn't there before and jacked it into a system, they would have needed a state permit to do that. But the state may or may not decide to ever come out and do their enforcement on that. So your health officer could, of their own volition, they basically just say, hi, we're coming, and give the person notice. And the person has to let them off. And maybe there's no problem, they say, oh, looks good, and they go home.
As far as the state and the septic, if they don't go to the state,
Yeah.
what's the chance that the state's going to, other than somebody happening to water by with, a Lister card?
Oh, there's no way for the state, like they're not getting, copies or receipts to buy septic tanks or anything. There's no way they're gonna know offhand. And the regional engineer is the person mainly you deal with on that. It was pretty good.
So if we were to consider adopting a very bare bones ordinance, can we do that without a town vote?
Yes, as long as you have not, the town has not voted by Australian ballot to vote on those things by Australian ballot, so we call it the vote to vote. Then the planning commission just does it, since the select board, there's a hearing, you'd have a hearing and you just adopt. And there's an even faster way through an interim process, as long as you kind of get something in the works, you can actually just do a hearing and adopt an interim bylaw like that, as long as you have a valid town plan.
And our intent to do this is to basically bring our listers up to date on what's going on out there.
Well, what I think what the staff has been seeing in particular, and what's been being discussed at some other levels, is kind of twofold issue. One is that 20 or so structures have popped up on the radar that who long knows how long they've been there. Those are just the structures. That's not the interior work. That's not the additions. That's not anything other than the physical structure that's popped up since the last time we were there. So obviously the first thing is kind of the loss of the tax revenue. There's just the basic structure of how the town should work. One of the first and foremost of the basic structures is just like a business revenue. We can't do anything without the money coming in. So there's a lot going on out there that we're missing, on top of the delinquencies that we have that are just kind of throwing this, basic function kind of, into a little bit of a turmoil here. The second thing that we're seeing is the development. I think that a healthy percentage of this development, we're questioning some of the septic, whether it is, installed, whether it's being shared, where it's going, what it's going. We do get septic permits, and we can tie into that probably better than we do, but there's been instances where we've checked, and there's nothing to cross with that, which leads us to believe that perhaps there isn't. But at the end of the day, something in place to, you can come in and build a house, without anybody knowing that you're even in town or anything that's going on. And it's kind of telling, not only during the reappraisal process, but during the spring when we post roads, it's amazing how many phone calls that I or Bill get from particular companies, the hardware store out of Lebanon or what have you, that needs to get up because, they're installing a bathroom, someplace, or, we got this on tap and we got to get up Densmore Road, tomorrow. It becomes apparent that there's obviously activity out there that we're essentially unaware of. So I think that that's kind of, what, some of this discussion, planning commission kind of, being, hearing tidbits of this discussion. Certainly Doug has made, what he has seen known to myself, to the select board, and to just about anybody who will listen, the development that he's seeing. And, hence the conversation being a part of the floodplain bylaws here today with Two Rivers.
So, any questions? That's a good transition over to flood bylaws. But any questions so far? Okay, so I'm going to jump into flood bylaws then, because this does somewhat tie in right now. Again, we see this in other towns, at Tunbridge or Bridgewater, other towns that don't have any standard zoning too. People often think, well, there's no zoning, there's no building permits, which is not true, of course, because anybody in your flood areas that are regulated need a permit, and they need a permit for nearly anything going on there. It's not like, they need a permit for interior renovations. They need a permit to grade the property. They need a permit to fill. They need a permit to drill a hole. They need all sorts of permits under flood bylaws. So I'm just going to give you a quick handout. So there's a bunch of copies there. There'll be leftover copies. And so you can keep this, and I'll try not to stand behind the pillar or the camera there for the audience. So this just covers some basic stuff. So I'm going to whip through this and then take any questions you have. First off, you have flood regulations now. We have a copy. You can find it on the website. Anybody can find the copy on the website as needed. You need flood regulations so anybody can buy flood insurance. If you want to get insurance for flood damage, your homeowners doesn't cover it. You need flood insurance. You get that through being in the National Flood Insurance Program. You get in the program by having flood regulations and making sure that they meet FEMA standards, which you do, which is good. You would not want to get out of that process because then nobody could get flood insurance anymore. FEMA would revoke their current flood insurance, and if anybody was in a flood property, they couldn't get a mortgage because the mortgage would require flood insurance or refinance it. So definitely don't want to run afoul of the program. But we also want to note, because it's a common misperception, that only people in flood zones can buy flood insurance, and it's not true. Anybody can buy flood insurance, and it's cheap. And a bunch of damage occurs outside of the mapped flood zone. So you may know spots that just, you're next to a teeny weeny brook. It's not regulated by FEMA, but still may make sense from a flood perspective. There are minimum regulations that are required. Your regulations are above those minimums, which are good. In particular, flood insurance is all about the height of the water. It's not about the water scooping out. And FEMA always just think about the surface of the water, and they're about that. And I'll talk about maps in a second. Your regulations require everything to be built 1 foot above the FEMA calculated water height, instead of right at the FEMA calculated water height, which is the minimum. And you can imagine if you were going to build a boat that had the gunnel was right at the surface of the water, that might not be a great boat to be in, right? You probably want a little extra, and we call that freeboard. Your regulations also regulate a little bit beyond the FEMA minimum, and then you regulate certain small streams that aren't mapped by FEMA. And that's nice. And they actually, yours kind of has a nice twist. It goes up to certain spots. So it doesn't just say all the streams on the map. It says this stream to that point. So anybody could find that particular stream. FEMA's maps aren't the best to access. And typically you're looking in these big old books and stuff. And so we have a map viewer that Pete, our mapper, built on our website. And so you can just fly around and look at your town. So we'll talk about this map in a second. The biggest thing is you have a bylaw. In that bylaw, you have an administrative officer, so the person who handles the permit applications, and you have a review board. So there needs to be a person and there needs to be a board too. Some things are exempt. Farming and forestry are exempt from your permitting process, period. Some things we just get a permit from the administrative officer, so he's going to build a patio or something. And then other things, you don't prohibit development in the flood zones. They're going to build a house in the flood zone. They need to come and get an approval by the review board first. before they get a permit. All permits go to the state for 30-day comment, and John Roper Campbell, who used to work for Southern Windsor, he's the floodplain coordinator, so everything goes to John. They don't get approval. They just get comment on stuff. So they don't get to say yes, no, don't issue that permit, that type of thing. But they get to comment on everything. And any work below top of bank needs a state stream alteration permit. Different process, different person. You need to keep a permit record, which, because you don't have standard zoning, you're not, oh yeah, the permit file, you don't have that big thing over there. But typically that is kept by parcel number from this point forward, so if anybody in the future wanted to know, did that parcel number get a flood permit for that house, you'd be able to track it by parcel number. On the back here, you see, and I have, there's a couple extra copies, but you have a map of basically the area up the road that way. This is Cobhill down. And there are lots of colors on the maps. And there's lots of things that say Loma too, which I should point all these things down in the corner say Loma, 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 Loma. As we say, the maps are often wrong, but they're officially wrong. I got a Loma at my house, Pete got a Loma at his house. My house is way above the stream, and the water won't get that high under any circumstance. And so one of the things you might find in administering the bylaw is somebody says, well, that's crazy. And you can say, fine, but we can't say it's crazy. You need to go get some official paperwork that says it's crazy. And you go through the process with an engineer, a surveyor, and a FEMA, and they don't make a new map. They just issue this letter of map amendment that says, you're out, and you're out, and you're out. And it's not good for your neighbor if I'm out and Mary's out, but you're in. And even though we can draw a straight line here, you go, well, you must be out too. No, everybody goes through that by their lonesome. So here you'll have what they call Zone X, which is the tops of hills and stuff, places that have you'll see it's that right down bottom. It says area of minimal flood hazard. It doesn't say area of no flood hazard. So everybody has flood risks. Then as you get closer, this kind of brownish color, that's the 500-year flood zone, or really the annual 2.2% chance flood zone, which you don't regulate. The blue area and then the blue and red area are the areas you regulate right now. The blue area is the area of special flood hazard, commonly called the floodplain. And the red and blue hatched area inside that is the floodway. It matters from a permit perspective where somebody is, and so the first thing a permit person does is your officer has to figure out where they are and call them in those areas and say, oh, you're in a floodway, or you're outside the floodway. Floodway, we have all these terms. I just call it the death zone because that's easy to remember. Don't go in the floodway. It's the death zone. Outside of there, there's obviously flood risk. And up here in the top here, you'll see this is a much more simpler stream that comes in, and that's just a Zone A. And that's when FEMA just made the maps with a pencil, kind of. There's no data on there. It's much more of a pain for a landowner to get a permit in there because they don't have any of the data they need. And the biggest data that they need, assuming Dave is your administrative officer, somebody comes in and says, I'm going to build here, and they have to figure out where that height of the water is. We call it base flood elevation. So I'm going to do a very quick thing. Your town has 4 books like this, which is the flood insurance study. And they used to send you just the town, now they send you the whole county. So I'm sure in about 2007, 2008, they sent you all of these. You might have thrown them away. You might have said, well, we're not giving Windsor County, that's not us. But actually you're in here. And if we were to look, and what happens is you can see these little places where it says X, Y, W, all those things. Those are actually where they surveyed across your valley to calculate that height of the water. And then these little squiggly black lines, you'll see numbers by them, and those are actually the elevation. So up there by the, let's see, by Y, there's a squiggly line right here that says 624. So that's the expected height above sea level of the flood. And then as you see, it goes downstream, it's 619, and then it's 613, and 609, and going around the corner at 603, so that water's really dropping along. But it isn't every foot. It goes from 624 to 619 to 613, and their house might be in the middle there. And then, what you would do, who's ever administering this, is you pull out the handy-dandy flood chart, and there's a map here that shows that's basically the river going downhill, and you'd look and you'd figure out where they are on the map. If you don't do that all the time, you call Pete and I. And you say, what is this? Where are they, number one? What does all this colors mean? What's the base flood elevation for that type of thing? All that type of stuff. And so we have all of this in our office, the same thing with the state, and we help you come up with the number that's their base flood elevation and how far they have to be up. If they're in a zone A, like up here, they're less out of luck because there's no data. They need to go hire an engineer and find what FEMA should have found in the first place. That's the really fast overview of flood regulations. The biggest takeaway is you can call us for the state. And Pete Fellows and I are certified flood managers, as is John Broken Cameron for the state. So we had to take a big test and put all this paper. And we do this a lot. And we have towns that do that. Like every flood permit comes in, they give us a call. So, we only do one a year. Help us with this thing.
Kevin, the two groups are the administrative officer and then the flood hazard review board.
Yeah, that's what your bylaw calls it.
From your experience looking at surrounding towns, and knowing we have a fairly busy town manager, what do other towns do as far as creating or dividing up the responsibilities there?
So, for example, in Bridgewater, which has no regulations, their town clerk is their flood administrative officer.
Okay.
And then basically their planning commission is their flood hazard review board. So the select board could be it, could be the planning commission, could be whoever. The select board appoints that board. And you have to have 3 to 9 people on. And or your administrative officer could just be a person you hire to just do the permit every now and then when they come along. You actually don't have that many, compared to some towns, structures in the floodplain.
Do you know how many people in town have flood insurance?
You have 12 policies, or at least the last time we checked. We can't tell you who they are, not because we can't, because we don't know.
Yeah.
But we can actually find out the number of policies. Yeah. About $2 million of insured value. Any other questions? That was real fast. Yeah.
So Hartland doesn't really have an administrator or a board appointed for this. But other than that, with this regulation, as it stands, does it sort of meet the requirement of FEMA?
Yeah, it needs to minimum, and it goes a little above because you don't say right after base flood, you have that extra foot. We suggest that you think about 2 feet, or at least you put a provision in your bylaw that says if you're building out there, build 2 feet higher, because your flood insurance rates will go down drastically. than if you built even at 1 foot above. There's some other things there. You allow building in a flood zone. A lot of towns say, no, you just can't build a new thing in a flood zone. That'd be the biggest change from that. And then you're a little into what we call river corridors, which is kind of all that small stuff out there, as well as where the river might wiggle in the future. That's something that gets you extra points in disasters with the state. Because of your current regulation, you actually regulate some of that because you have this 50-foot setback on some small streams. I keep pointing as if these are maps of the town, which they obviously are. If they are, that's the map of the town. And so there you want to worry about the river moving. Your streams in particular compared to Braintree or something aren't drastically moving sideways. We do have towns where those streams are seriously moving.
Were the surveys that were done before Irene or after Irene?
Oh, the surveys were done about the time I was born.
Yeah, that's what it's afraid of.
Yeah. I have a picture of the Bee Gees when I give a talk sometimes just to remind people so they basically did the surveys pre-disco. They actually then did the maps around disco time, early 70s, 80s. Then in 2007, as you may remember, they redid the maps. All they did, besides the Connecticut River itself, so for Lulls Brook, all they did is they took the old map and they put it on in a digital format. So it's not any new data. So even though they'll say, map adopted 2007, it's really like a 1970s map. And the biggest thing in there is they were using what they thought was going to be the rain from the 50s when they drew the 70s map. So they have no account of the jump in precipitation since then, which was really since 1996. The Northeast just had a massive jump in extreme rainfall. And we expect that to continue, so we're kind of using outdated maps. And they drew it by looking at stereoscopic pictures of the town, so we didn't have good topography, as you can imagine, because it's all about topography and where that water's going to go. And now we have good topography too.
Kevin, are the bylaws in effect if the person, the administrator of the board, review board isn't necessarily named, or?
Yeah, you kind of have, it's kind of like the speed limit. If they didn't have any state police doing speed limit, we'd still have speed limits on the interstate. But yeah, and you don't want to not be permitting stuff that needs a permit, because then FEMA, of course, can say, we'll throw you out of the flood insurance program.
Yeah, we've had a town that got one of those letters.
And they quickly got rid of it. Because the people with flood insurance would then get another letter saying, hi, your mortgage is about to be due today because you'll no longer be insured. So again, assuming you get the people and get them all on board, we're happy to come down and then train those people more fully on all this stuff. And the other thing we've done, just because again, the average homeowner, I didn't look at the flood maps. For some towns, what we can do is we can marry your grand list map, assuming we've got parcel data. We can marry it with a flood map because they're all digital products. And we can say, okay, these are all the affected properties. It doesn't mean all the properties in the flood zone, but at least all these owners own some flood zone. And then you can, next time you send everybody a thing, you put a little postcard and say, by the way, just letting you know.
We do have that now. We have our tax maps online. It does have the 100 and 500 year.
Okay. But the owners don't necessarily get any notice that says you're in the flood zone.
That's correct.
Okay. Any questions?
No.
All done?
I do have a slightly off-topic question. The list of brooks, are those going to be the hydraulically connected road brooks?
No, those are not directly related. I mean, I'm sure those will be as well, but it'll be many, many more streams. It'll be every unnamed stream out there too.
Sorry. Ka-ching.
So we should, sounds like we need to have a committee and administrator.
Very.
So we don't have an administrative officer now?
I think so, unless, what is it?
So I think in the Martinsville Road case, I think that Bob acted as the administrator, and if I'm not incorrect, I think the select board acted as the review board to some degree in that case.
I think that's right.
I do know as maybe part of the discussion with the planning commission in Two Rivers, there was some discussion that perhaps the planning commission would act as a more viable review board. And I think that would probably be probably the right place to kind of go with that. Just, I mean, be like trying to, we're either calling separate meetings or working, not that we get a whole lot of activity, but, it's just kind of I think you guys have enough to kind of worry about. It's a little bit off topic for the select board. I think it's a little bit more than the ballpark of the planning commission, but that would just be my recommendation, something to look at as you think about it.
Right, and we do have members of the Conservation Commission that are also paying attention to this as well. So I wonder if there might be a hybrid approach. If we're worried about getting the right number of bodies together, I'd be happy to sort of hear from the Planning Commission to see if that's something that you would like to sort of step up and do, or.
We have discussed it, and they have decided that it's really important that it be done, and it's not probably your big chore when somebody is educated as the administrator of it. There are probably not very many cases that would require review by a board, and an application, and another a process to get it approved. And I think we thought that was something that the planning commission could do, and you can take on if we were asked to.
Yeah, the only thing I would add is part of my earlier get-go, when we identified small brooks and all the feeder streams. And so we know where they are in relation to certain properties. So
But they're all in this floodplain as we put this in regulation.
What do others think? I don't think I think that makes a lot of sense. Fine. I got to decide right now, but I guess we could. One. When did we think we decide that now?
I'm enthusiastically in favor of it,
Good.
or moderately in favor of it.
Yeah.
I gotta look at the scale, because I forget those parameters.
Did you say something, Mary? I'm sorry.
The 3-page thing that
No.
you sent us,
Forget that.
do you want me to refer to it?
No.
Okay. I am definitely in favor of it. It's- How do you feel about it?
Well, I've got mixed emotions.
Okay.
That's
Yes.
true.
I think maybe it might be better to have a combination of both. Maybe have the planning commission be the administrator and the select board be the review board. And I don't know if I have a particular reason for the select board to be the review board, but
Consolidation of power.
maybe that way both could be involved.
I just had the one experience with as you know, down in Martinsville. It was kind of it was fairly cut and dried, I think. There wasn't a lot of, it was either right or wrong, wasn't it? More or less. Maybe not.
I don't know if anything's cut and dry.
No.
Matt, with your idea, if I were a property owner and wanted to get information about some next steps, where would I go? You know, I come into town and then they would tell me a representative of the planning commission would be the person to contact, or do I go to their meeting to get information?
You need a person to be the administrator.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm going. That's what it is.
And some towns will have an acting too, in just in case that person's out of town.
No, I don't know either.
That's what comes to mind for me.
That, I don't know what you're on a spot there. That's, you have a lot to do. Are you interested in that, being that person?
That might be a manager update discussions, and I kind of go over some of the things that we've had on our plate and where we're going. And my quick answer to that is I think that we're still working on a lot of issues from years prior. And I think that there's probably an underlying reason for that. And I think that, I think that in some of my past reports, I've talked about delegation of work duties and some things to that extent. I think that I don't think that the town manager involved in the administrative aspect of this is going to get us closer to getting some of the bigger tasks done that need to be focused on. I guess would be my quick answer.
Yeah.
Did I, Peter or Kevin, again, can you help us with other scenarios of who in towns who might be the administrator?
Some towns also just, like the next town's person, they go, why don't you do us too? They've got somebody part-time or that's doing it for a couple towns and you just pay them by permit. So they're not paid, to exist. They're just okay when we get a permit, then you get paid that way. So you might ask surrounding towns, okay, what do you think?
That sounds like a plan. So that sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Food for thought down the road, if the word something to consider, having the building permit part of this discussion. The other thing that kind of slips through the cracks is the junk ordinance and some of the other items that we talked about as far as the health officer. So I think that if, something along the lines of what Kevin was talking about, was to be entertained, I think that there are enforcement items out there that certainly could captivate somebody's attention. I think that it has been the town manager in the past. And again, I think that the variety of things that we're tackling at the moment, I think that for me anyways, this is probably at the bottom of the pile. Yet I think that some of the things that we're hearing, this is and seeing, as far as the new development and other things going on, I think that it is somewhat of an important item to keep in mind here in town.
Well, we'll put the building permit thing on the agenda for another discussion another time. As far as that's concerned. And I don't know. The planning commission seems to be willing. That's a big plus. And I understand where you're coming from. don't know if there's any way we can have a little input into those final decisions. If we happen to have another one, I don't know.
So Bert, are you suggesting that we table the building permit discussion, or we just continue it at another time?
We'll continue that another time, because I think there's more, that's a big, fair subject that we, even though Kevin promises it to be a bare bones, still an issue has not been very favorable, very popular in town. And with the flood thing, there again, maybe because we aren't 100% in agreement here, I don't think. We don't have to decide that right now.
I wouldn't wait too long though.
Yeah, I
because
understand,
I think FEMA could take note that there was a permit that
Yeah,
needed to be dealt with and stuff.
yeah, that's still, we could,
Are we in 100% agreement that the planning commission would be the review board?
well,
Okay, can we at least confirm that tonight?
You're not 100%. You're not.
he's the one that's not 100%.
Yeah, he's not 100%.
Okay. But I thought we had some discussion saying that a board could not be necessarily a good administrator.
No, we
No.
we got that. We have to have an administrator, and Kevin's idea of,
Okay, now you're thinking that the select board would be. Can you please say what you were thinking again?
I thought the select board could be the review board.
Okay.
And it can be, it's whoever you find.
So really, if we decided to be the review board, we would just have to appoint an administrator.
so we have to do that anyways. I guess the only concern I have is I think the planning commission has about a knowledge of the issues that we do. And also, Carol Lewin. Thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think they spent a lot of time on these issues.
Yeah. I mean, I'm willing to let Matt think about it 2 more weeks. Do it another time.
And that's fine. They can do it if they want.
Do you have ambiguous support, would you say?
I don't know. Those words are too big for me. I don't understand them.
Let me see.
Don't.
Stop it.
Okay.
Let's hear it from Roger again, and Jay, and Bob, somebody here that wants to talk about your.
The way you're leaning, the fact that there probably, maybe was the last time there was an application that maybe even could have or should have gone to the review board, was maybe never. And so if you say, okay, we're taking the responsibility on ourselves, and Kevin's in front of the name of somebody who could administer this on a first-time basis, if the contact comes in to anybody in town, they refer to this administrator, and so you charge him a fee that's equal to what his fee is. So it doesn't cost anything, and the select board has things covered so nobody loses insurance. But the few times that you might ever have to get up anywhere near the speed on the regulations and what you really can legally do with them to hold a hearing and so forth. You know, I mean, you've been here how long, Dave, and you haven't seen an application come in, seen one possible one come in, right?
One command.
So it's not like you're taking on a big piece of work.
I also didn't know we had, but it's a side issue.
I should know, this is not meant to sway you either way, but the planning commission, one of the duties of the planning commission is for administrative officers, is they're supposed to nominate that person to you guys to appoint. So they, so you can tell them, you go find us a person.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah.
Do you think maybe we have enough to do and not can do it?
No, they can do it. That's fine. I mean, we could give everything away if we wanted to.
Not going to do that.
And I'm also thinking we have the board of abatement stuff coming up with the board of civil authority and
It's hard work, business and building decisions.
I hear you, and I want to hear more of your thoughts, and I support.
Get out of here, would you? I'm gonna get arrested for assault.
Okay, we'll talk about this again.
I'm gonna wait until, for 2 weeks.
Okay,
We're gonna decide in 2 weeks.
thank you so much.
Thank
Oh,
you.
we don't have to.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Dave.
Some things
Thank you, Peter.
work out at 7.
Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Bob. That's all the planning commission.
Yeah. Plus,
Thanks, Doug.
plus Doug.
Thanks, Knox.
Knox is on.
Thank you. Thank you.
What do you want us to go around here?
I'm bringing this in. I think it's very handy.
Here's one, hazard spouses. Two open positions.
Roger, are you in a big rush to leave? Okay, we're gonna do some appointments. We might need a little advice.
Facilitate the consensus.
So just
Thrilled with
can
this.
hang in a little bit longer.
We did.
So we've got a long list, and I think of appointments to do, and we have some names. But we've got, maybe you have a couple of vacancies.
We have had, but we are, as long as we make a quorum with 7 people, we're okay with that, because nobody's come forward and wanted to be on the commission. We have
Yeah.
Strauss was up for reappointment, he's agreed to serve another 3-year
Yeah.
term, so.
Yeah. So let's move along down through the list of appointments, and
Why don't you go ahead and pluck off the planning commission and appoint, why don't you do them kind of commission by commission and committee? So you can go a little bit out of order here. So you got Roger, the planning commission with David Strauss. At the moment, he's the only person to nominate. So you got 2 seats open on that committee, but Roger seems satisfied with that.
I guess, Roger, if someone comes forward with interest in that committee, you'd let us know, right? 'Cause we could appoint somebody at another time,
The thing is, right now, we have an odd number of people, so
which is good.
quorum, the vote thing works.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah, yeah,
If you have 9 people, then it's sometimes hard to get a quorum, to get people drift off somewhere and just.
yeah.
I nominate David Strauss to be in the planning commission.
second.
Yeah. Does everybody know David?
Yeah, are we nominating or appointing?
Thank you.
Oh.
Well, okay.
I'd like to ask you to change the word.
Make a correction, appoint David Strauss to be on the planning commission.
Thank you.
Is everybody good with that?
I'm very good with that.
Okay, all right, we're set. David is good. We're on with David.
Next would be the Conservation Committee. Commission, I'm sorry.
I did circle that in.
Yeah, I always go the opposite way. Sorry. I always like, Rob's gonna get on me.
That's the only reason I'm here.
Rob always tells me it's not a commission, it's a committee. I guess it's the other way around.
We have a question.
Yeah.
Are the terms staggered any? Are they all supposed to be 4 years or?
Yes, we're all supposed to be for you.
They're staggered in that, how many committee members do you have altogether?
We have 9.
You have 9. So there's,
3 up for the,
yeah.
All right.
and they're all people who have been on the commission.
Commission?
It is commission.
Oh, it is
Yeah,
commission?
yeah, yeah.
Commission. This is wrong. Conservation Commission. Rob, can you tell me when you meet?
Yes, we meet the second Wednesday here at 7 o'clock. So our next meeting is the 10th.
7 o'clock.
Yep.
Okay.
I can copy you guys on the agenda if you're interested. Phil gets them automatically. So I could copy everybody on it if you want.
I would like to see that.
Yeah, well, at least once.
Rob, I know Zach has been a big contributor to your commission, and I'm excited to see his name here. Has he said yes and able to make the commitment?
Yes. And we talked about that because he is now a representative, so as part of the, he can't be at meetings. But he said he would like to continue on the commission, and we'd like to have him even more now that he's a representative.
Can these all be done at once?
Yes.
Sure.
Yep, Conservation Committee, yep.
I appoint Doug.
Commission.
I appoint Guy Crosby, Zach Ralph, and Jennifer Waite to the Conservation Committee, Commission. And now you've got that in my head for a 4-year term.
I'll second it.
Okay, so very clear with that.
Yeah, I enthusiastically, yes,
Okay, good.
that vote.
All right. So now we're off to the rec committee.
So the rec committee, you've got the 2 ones that are being reappointed, Chris Salza and Todd Randall Strawbridge, right?
Randall, yeah.
Randall, I'm sorry. 2 new ones, and Todd Gray is
Is Todd Gray also? Yes.
reappointed, okay. And then you had 2 that moved out of town, so there are 2 new
So
ones.
this is a resume.
There are 2 new people interested in filling their spots. These just came in today, so they didn't make your packet. John, the first one, Candida?
Yep, Candy Gray.
Okay.
Candy has lived here since, what did she say? 2006.
No,
She had 2 daughters that came to the school here.
1997.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
She's been a volunteer soccer coach. Most recently, she's been at 4th of July helping with concessions at Old Home Day for the rec center. So she's already been involved to a certain extent. So when I was throwing some feelers out there, she expressed interest in becoming an official committee member. She's already been volunteering and helping the recreation department out as well. So thought she was a nice addition. And then, Chad, the other, I asked Chad if he was interested because Chad had been volunteering and helping out. Thank you. As much as anyone for us. Chad, since we started our ski runners program at Suicide 6, has volunteered the services of his flatbed truck, and Chad meets us down at the school, and we load all the skis and the snowboards in the back of Chad's truck, and then Chad brings them down to Suicide 6 for all of our skiers and snowboarders, and lines them up at the bottom of the ramp so everybody's equipment is there and ready to go, which has been very valuable. The bus company does not want the skis and snowboards inside the bus because of fear of damage to the bus, so this has been a fantastic service for us. Not to mention when he's out skiing, he's also emergency medicine trained as well, so it's just nice to have an extra person out there with our group with those services. He's also been the volunteer soccer coach for his son's 3rd and 4th grade soccer team the last 2 years as well. So both of these individuals have already been making volunteer contributions to the recreation department, so I thought they would be nice additions to the committee to sit down and hear their contributions when we get together.
Good. That sounds good. So, you're in the mode for
Sure, why not? I'd like to appoint Todd Gray, Chris Selza, Rendell Strawbridge, Chad, help me with it. Tribot, and Candy Gray to the Recreation Committee for a 3-year term.
Second.
Aye. Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you got
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good, John. I'm glad that you got some enthusiastic help. But on that.
Let's go ahead and do the, why don't we do next the Energy Committee in Syracuse.
Sarah has pleaded nominated for this, and I'm really thrilled about that because she's a really strong worker and has really, she was the engine behind the carbon footprint workshops that we did recently, which was not the Energy Committee, it's another group I'm involved with, but it's a beautiful PowerPoint for it. She has a background in teaching and just really the steady hand I think we need for the Energy Committee. So I really strongly recommend her.
I heard Sarah speak and lead the discussion. She's a great job. Any questions for Sarah?
Is there any term limits on these appointments in the Energy Committee, and how many members is there?
We have 7 members now, and so this will bring the number up to 8. And how does that affect your quorum?
I don't know if you don't really vote on anything. Do you need one?
They, if I recall, last year I looked at their charter, so to speak, and it's just, kind of a band of volunteers that's, kind of elected by the select board. I looked to see if there was like a minimum number to the committee, and there isn't. So, and I also don't believe that there are term limits with the Energy Committee. So, but we should probably catch up on some of the folks that have resigned. But otherwise, I think that this fits with the charter, from what I recall.
Yeah,
We also have Zach on our committee and don't really want to let him go, which isn't a problem in the summertime, but
yeah. Well, I think we're all glad that the committee has pretty much a new life, achieved a new spark or something, because it got along with 1+ members for several years, so that's good that we've got more people involved. Sarah Bruce.
I think I'd like to appoint Sarah Bruce to the Energy Committee.
a second.
Everybody's good with that? Okay, good.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Bye.
You are my good.
Where am I reading? Why, I was in Georgia last night.
I know, I could tell you, right? Not supposed to be able to do that.
Executive session, I do. Just, two more things.
Okay.
Gordon, this one kind of depends on your comfort level. For the health officer, there's an official sheet.
Yeah, you sent us a copy of that, I think.
And I didn't have David fill it out, but I filled in like his name and stuff like that. You appointed him last meeting, more or less, but we can make it official and have you, at this point, how it's gonna work is he's going to be appointed as a deputy. He'll work, Bob will still remain as health officer for however long Bob.
Is that October? Did you say that last time or not?
His term expires in October. He can resign before that. So I think that the thought was there'd be a little bit of overlap between Bob and Dave. So we can name Dave as deputy, which is what the sheet was for. And then when Bob is ready, Bob can resign. Oddly enough, David also needs to resign as deputy, and then he's named.
Okay.
And then he's named as health officer.
We have lots of paper.
I had your sheet to, right here. I don't have all his address and email stuff and all that good stuff on here. You can add that later, but if you feel comfortable with that, you can renominate him as deputy and you can sign it as the chairman of the Board of Health. And we can.
That's me, chairman of the Board of Health?
Correct.
Okay. All right, I think are we all comfortable?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm excited.
I'm enthusiastic.
I'm good. I think it's a good choice. Why did you try to aggravate? That's funny.
The right one. David's got to bring it in.
We're gonna get it.
Oh.
One foot code.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Get to that first off.
Slow down.
Sorry.
You can sit right there, though. Yeah.
Excitement is just.
It is. Who's in?
Extended warranty to, I gave it the wrong truck number. I said 6. I think it's actually 5, but it's the one that we purchased last fall.
As if you'd know the difference.
I will let, I kind of tasked Martin with this, and I will let him explain and know what we're looking for.
So, we've been looking at the bids for the new truck, and he came through with, they put bids out for extended service plans. So I called up about the truck we just bought and see if we can still get one on that. So the truck comes with basically a year warranty on the truck and the engine, 3 years, 36,000 miles. We can go to 7 year, 100,000 miles with 4 different.
I'm sorry, can you say what it came with?
336.
All right, continue, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Martin, just a fundamental piece, is this, who's offering that warranty? Because this truck was.
Manufacturer, it's from the manufacturer.
Okay, so what, Ford or?
It's a Detroit motor, so it's a Detroit warranty
Okay.
on the engine itself.
And then the modifications that were done afterwards to.
So that's from the HP Fairfield where we got the body done.
Right.
That would have nothing to do with it.
And those don't interfere with that
They
part
do
of the
not
warranty you
interfere.
just told Matt about. Okay,
Right,
thank
yeah,
you.
no, they do not interfere with that. They also offer a body warranty for the chassis itself, not the engine. But it doesn't cover a lot of stuff that we would need, so it doesn't make sense to do that. So the engine comes with 4 different components, EW1, 2, 3, and 4. EW1 is pretty much the interior of the engine, pistons, piston rings, where the gas is going through. EW2 is adding the fuel injectors, the turbocharger, and the water pump. But you want to do a turbocharger because there's a turbocharger on all the diesel engines. And the turbocharger, if it went out, it's going to be $3,000 to $5,000 to fix. EW3 adds the aftermarket part of the catalytic converter, where we now put DEF fluid in for the federal government, where the catalytic converter changes about 7-8 years ago. And EW4 includes the catalytic converter with a particulate filter in it. If the catalytic converter part goes, it's $15,000 just to fix that part of it with the new design. Matt knows it with the trucks now that have them on all the trucks. So my recommendation is EW4. We do it for 7 years, 100,000 miles, and it's $4,715. Now, Craig told me that if we traded the trucks in, with the warranty left on the truck, we can get up to an extra $40,000 on trade-in. Because he has customers that want the trucks, knowing they came from the town, that they've been maintained, and they'll have warranty for a year, so they don't have to worry about a blown turbo, blow plug, or anything.
How much is it again? 4,000?
$4,715.
I don't want to get too geeky here, but I'm not worried about turbochargers. I'm worried about injection systems and fuel rails.
Yep, exactly. And a glow plug is $300 to $400.
So that would be covered under the...
Yes, that would be covered, absolutely.
So you're getting coverage for all 4 of these things?
Yes.
Yeah.
The EW4 covers everything. Anything the gasoline touches and oil touches. They ask once a year, they'll come up, they'll take the truck back to the shop, they'll do a full tune-up on it. There's certain filters that have to be changed every 18 months, so that way we don't miss it. And there'll never be an issue with the warranty.
And this 4,700, that's a yearly fee?
Nope, that's
It's
a
a
one-time fee.
And does this extend it 7 years, or does it make it 7 years?
It makes it 7 years. But if we trade the truck between the 5th and 6th year, we can get an extra.
It's cheap. A little bit extra, just a warranty. Okay.
If you buy a regular pickup truck, when you're buying the truck, they want to sell you an extended service plan at the time. Those range anywhere from $1,500 to $2,200.
Did we buy one on the 110, an extended warranty?
We did.
And that's the same money.
Yeah, that was because that's a diesel, so that was around $2,700. You're right.
With all this perfect care, he's probably not on the pigs.
Well, and actually, I just bought a vehicle this weekend, and they said that you get rebated.
Yes.
They will rebate part of that money if you trade it in early.
Oh, I see.
Yep. They prorated over the 7 years. But right, they'll give us a proration toward it. They'll keep the warranty on it for the next buyer that he has that likes to buy him. And he said he can usually give up to $40,000 more towards trading. But it does not cover the body part, obviously, because
It's just the motor you're
yeah,
talking
it's
about.
just the motor. Yeah, everything the gas and the oil touches.
This is a little bit off subject. We were having trouble with a truck, front end, four-wheel drive. I assume something about overloaded going downhill or something. Did the manufacturer cover that?
They're still fighting it. There's many towns that have that exact same truck, and they have the exact same problem. And Craig has been talking to Western Star to find out what they can do to help the towns out. We're not the only one with that problem.
Okay.
And like I said, the body one was another $3,000 to $4,000, but it doesn't cover the axle seals, the axles, so it doesn't make sense to spend the money on that. But the engine, having the engine covered, a turbo goes, it's $3,000 to $4,000. Glow plug goes, it costs you $400 or $500. That's where we're at.
Well, I'm not too sure why we're being asked this question, but are you looking for Yes.
Just because this actually technically doesn't really need select board approval, but because the truck was purchased last fall for a fairly substantial amount of money, this was not a part of it. I felt as though I'd bring it back to the board. Let you know that we were coming back for this piece of it. I think we were a little bit more educated with this truck that we're purchasing, or will be coming in front of you fairly soon, on the extended warranties, and felt as though we should pick this up. So just very transparency purposes, really.
Yeah, that's good.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Also, may see the same discussion again. 2 weeks or so.
So we have contacts meeting.
Yes, oh, here, yes.
Yeah, that's really important.
Okay. So,
Which would you like?
both.
Okay. Corey, can you pass me that? Cookies.
Cookies. On the children.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well,
Get back to the chocolate.
I'll pass it down, he's busy. Pass it back, all right, please.
Did you make these?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd pass them along.
I'm even one enthusiastic.
Thank you, Mary. You're welcome. Cup of tea.
Oops, excuse me. Okay. Oh, that's fair. All right.
Yeah, you're not gonna also do that.
Ready for no?
I got my mouth full.
Oh dear.
Yeah, fair amount to kind of touch on here. Highway weather is keeping us pretty busy. This weekend, rain and warm weather, and then cold again last night. Kind of par for course for the winter that we've had. Densmore is starting to thaw. Top part as you come out of the trees, coming into maybe Bobby Bibby's property there. We addressed today. A little road more over toward Woodstock, Morley Road, was a real meltdown. We threw some more product down at Jennyville today. Those were kind of our focus today, coming out of the weekend. More on Morley tomorrow, more on Densmore probably as we progress here. In particular, a little bit on Hartland Hill still to come. So that is what we've been doing, where we're kind of focusing on those places that are essentially impassable or become really kind of mud bogged. We've had a few of them so far, putting material in there to kind of congeal it. Again, last meeting, Jennyville Road, or Jennyville was a prime piece of discussion, as that one really kind of went early. I am starting to pull together the utilities for the Three Corners intersection project. I also met with Rita Cito on Friday about the bike ped grant that is due in June. We've been talking about incorporating the sidewalk from the post office to the library as part of that project and as part of grant funding. Peter Gregory was also part of that discussion. There was talk about the possibility that in the bike ped grant, that not just that particular sidewalk, but the sidewalk essentially for the entire project could potentially be pulled into the bike ped program. That is the good positive news. However, nothing is without work, and we would need essentially VHB to pull out the pricing of the sidewalk from the rest of the project to kind of put into the application. But there's a potential that if we can make that work, we can make that happen, we can incorporate the entire sidewalk into a bike ped grant. Also gets a little dicey in the bike ped grant. You need to put the construction engineering out to bid. They were part of kind of the subcontracting bid of the original proposal. We're not really sure how that fits into things. A little bit of controversy with the engineer to begin with on that subject. So that just clouds it a little bit. But certainly something to maybe look into and work towards with the sidewalk from the post office to the library being a minimum at this point in time, I think, with potentially something more than that. Again, it's a little bit of a tight window and availability to do that, and also moving forward with the utilities makes that kind of a busy
Do you have a
project.
any kind of an estimate of what that might save us if all of the sidewalks were incorporated into the grant?
I don't know at the moment, but that certainly would be
Substantial,
a substantial part of the project.
50, 60,000, I bet, at least.
At least, I mean,
Maybe more.
the work just for the post office to the library was 72,000. That's just sidewalk work.
So the sidewalk also includes all the granite and the curbing, so,
And it's going all the way up and around.
so quite a lot.
Yeah.
So,
So maybe
I'm
that's the
not sure, when we say the additional sidewalk area, are we talking across the green space? Or where?
Well, anything, there's some in front of Matt's
Oh, okay,
corner and around where the parking's going, the parking,
Yeah.
probably in front of Damon Hall.
yeah,
Also, at the intersection that comes from
okay, so,
and around, I think we quite a lot of sidewalk.
yeah, so nothing beyond the project, but the project sidewalk itself?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. What, did they give you a comfort level of if we broke this out, what it might, would it be, come to pass that it would be approved, or?
Nothing's for sure.
Yeah.
I think they felt as though it was a pretty good percentage chance that it could be. Again, it's a little complex. We got Queechee Road already with kind of one grant. And, we introduced this as kind of another grant, and it's, we got a couple of different moving pieces and how that would fit in with the bike ped. But Rita was going to give the gentleman that oversees that particular program a call. And just kind of touch on some questions that we had, but I would say, if they were able to break it out, it would be I would say a good percentage chance that they would incorporate into it. I think it's a matter of, again, it's from a time perspective, we're kind of getting into the utilities. He would have to spend the time to, actually, shouldn't be a tremendous amount of time to take a look at he's got the estimates already, you need to update them a little bit and break that out, particular pertaining to just the sidewalk stuff. But, just making sure that it came together by, mid-May so that we could put the package together and submit it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're still finalizing easements, and it's taken us this long to get here on the utility, so, that's my hesitation to say, great, this is not, unfortunately, the way this has kind of been pieced together and, kind of hamstrung. It's just not an easy, something to easily react to and, put together. So that would be my
Hesitation.
That would be my hesitation to say, yeah, we can, pull this together. Obviously, but if we can get some focus on it, I think that we could maybe, make it happen. I haven't heard back from, call out to the engineers and company. I haven't heard back from them, so I don't have a real good feel for, what they think that they could do for a turnaround. 21 House has been reduced to 189 from 199 as of late last week. We'll see how that goes. It's got, some interest, obviously at the lower end interest, but, interest nevertheless, so we'll see. We'll stick with this for a bit. The property tax appeals are still just lingering out there. Percy's hasn't moved. That may be, coming about in June. The Hartland LLC property up Best Road is still, we're waiting on a decision on the legality of the finer point of were we late a day or not, and as to where that goes. And the Kessler one is just kind of in the court system. And it's actually in PVR, which is the state property valuation review. You have two choices. You can go to Superior Court or you can go to PVR. She went to PVR on this one. The other two went to Superior Court, but they haven't. There it sits. So we're on standby on all three. I included, I had sent you kind of a list of a to-do list back in February. I kind of pulled it out of the closet just to kind of remind you of what we've done and where we're going, at least until midsummer. Just kind of as a review, most of that town meeting and town report stuff obviously is done and behind us. The new town highway crew has been with us since January 31st. I'm still working on the Three Corners intersection easements and utilities. I did speak with Matt Dunn today. He indicated again that he will sign the easement. That has been written, is in front of him and his lawyer. If today's conversation holds true, that should be imminent. We still need to get Gene Garthwaite back. I'm not expecting a whole lot of issues with him. Fred Coley letter went out. Roads have been posted. It's all updated in the DMV system. Overlay permits continue to come in. They are need to be renewed by today. At least the old ones are through till the end of March. Coming up, local emergency operation plan. They kind of have a new format. I need to submit that by the first week in May, or a little bit afterwards. There's a little bit of wiggle room there, but it's coming up in May. Front steps of the rec center is going out to bid this week. So we should, there was some I forget the terminology for that, qualified people to put that out to that are capable of doing that work. Those will go out. The engineer will look at the submittals and has a contract that we can utilize for that work as well. Been working with 3 roof folks. James Woods was one, Vermont Roofing, and another one that was recommended by the engineer on the overhang in the valley. If you recall, we had some leakage in that roof through the winter time.
Who's the third one?
A guy by the name of Randy, Just Good Builders, I want to say. He was a recommendation from the engineer from a historical, from a work perspective, to be able to work with slate roof and do essentially the work underneath it. So we're progressing on that front as well. We're transitioning from winter through mud season, obviously. Pike, the Brownsville project, is still scheduled for May. Next tax sale, we're eyeing May, June type thing. I kind of need to get back in touch with the lawyer on that. I'll be submitting names. We do have a healthy 20 names to submit for that. Coming up in May, we'll also be, putting out the advertisement for the buildings and grounds position. Long term, I got a couple things on here, but to fit in with the conversation prior, I've got kind of a long-term thing here of analyze our administrative efficiency, make recommendations on improvement. I think I hit on an important part of the structure essentially of the office and the administrative positions. I think that simply put, we've been working on a couple of things for a very long time. As these small things come up, you ask me when is the Three Corners intersection project going to be done? I don't give you an answer simply because Fort Brook Road comes in and they want us to take on that road, poof, I get, the ship kind of tilts. Something else comes in, we kind of tilt the other way. So I think that, I guess where I'm going with that is kind of the workload and how it's delegated. And I think that the discussion of some of the permitting and whether we get that to a part-time person or how we look at that, I think that at least alleviates the burden of the junk ordinance stuff or, the floodplain stuff. This is stuff that Bob, fell on Bob's plate, the Fred Coleys of the world that, I haven't touched, that's still hanging out there, hasn't been done, we haven't finished up on it. I don't think it's any one particular person's fault for that. I think it's just a matter of whatever comes through the door, that's what we've got, and that's what kind of, pulls us. So, I just hit on that. That was kind of a long-term issue, but I think it's pertinent to what the discussion was tonight anyways.
So I have a question. In your notes, you had said about finance and delinquent taxes are down. The number's down to a total of 88.
Yep. 82, I think now.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Delinquencies with a total of 350,000 down from 350,000 last meeting. So, yeah, I noticed that too.
Might be 250 down from 350, which was down from 510 or something like that originally. So that also is coming down, but as I mentioned, we've got 82 of them, a really high number. We've got a couple that are, again, those 20 are, there's some heavy hitters in there, the $20,000 range, a couple, 3, 4, 5 years. We've got a lot, and again, this is going to kind of come back to the building permit thing, or just looking at what's coming in. Another problem that we've got, this is just the way we are, is people coming in, these unlanded mobile homes that get plopped there. If they're delinquent on taxes, they're just kind of a bear. There's not a whole lot, $600-700 a year, because they're only getting taxed on the mobile home. They don't get taxed on the land underneath that, because it's somebody else's land. So 4 years out is, $2,500, but then again, you're staring at somebody who's 4 years out on a delinquency. You got to kind of reel that in.
Yeah.
But push comes to shove, and we end up with a mobile home that we now get rid of for the property owner, essentially. So we got a number of those. So there's some real small stuff and some big stuff, and then everything in between. So we know that number's getting down. The sheer volume of delinquencies that we got, so it goes back to that structural revenue problem. It's a problem. But it is, again, it's better than 500,000 on the right side.
Anything else, any correspondence?
You had 2 correspondence. You had one on consensus and whether it's a happy smiling face or a frowny blanket face that was submitted by one of our consistent spectators.
Sarah?
I'd like to comment on that if I might. I offered an apology when I made the comment about the consensus model at the last meeting. I violated the basic principle, which is if you're going to comment on something, bring at least one alternative suggestion. And I hope to remedy that by submitting this particular article as a piece of correspondence through Dave. And I'd like to follow up by a note of appreciation because I saw you all actually practicing with it tonight, which said you took the time to read it and try it. And to compliment you on, as awkward as it may have felt to you, it really was helpful for at least some of us sitting here. I can't speak for the others. And I would be curious if you were to continue to try to use this at times when it felt helpful, whether that would in fact start to feel at all natural or helpful to you also. And then the other thing is about other sorts of models and material. It just felt to me like that was one of the most straightforward and practical ones. It's been around for at least 40 years. And so is a well-known and frequently used approach. So happy to be responsible about, offering more that's meaningful. Also happy to stop at this point and be appreciative of what you've done with it.
One was communication, I'll just clarify. I put in your packet, I don't know if y'all read it, but it had to do with the Waterbury Rec Center and the situation they had with the Human Rights Commission, which was something I think, Mary, we ended up talking about at one point in time. 6 of one, half dozen the other. They took somebody in. Parent did not notify them of issues that perhaps they should be aware of or that may benefit the child. Child acted up and they knee-jerk reaction. The staff reacted as they would with a child that they may be more inclined to be accustomed to disciplining, which, that might not be the best course of action with a child such as this, which led them to the Human Rights Commission. In our case, it was kind of the other way around. We asked for additional information, to kind of buffer that. And, again, we kind of ended up there. So where that middle ground is, I think that, as we just kind of meander through this and we become, more, I think it's a lot like the schools. The schools have kind of meandered their way through this and have learned the do's and do's nots or where they need to bring in special help. I think that this is going to, we're going to kind of follow that path to a degree and realize that staff training certainly, whereas it's not just reffing soccer games anymore, but we need to be well aware of, social behavior and traumatic behavior or what could be, just be aware of the children and what may be in their background and how that might affect their behavior. And I think it's just something that the discipline certainly needs to be there and a disciplinary policy, but certainly kind of a, take a deep breath and understand the situation before you kind of react.
Yeah, Dave, as hard as it is, I have to echo what you've said. And I find the Waterbury incidents, there's so many parallels where the parents chose not to disclose that the child was needy in any way. They get into a very bad situation where there's, I think the counselor, if I read it correctly, thought their other kids were at harm and material stuff was at harm, and presto, that wasn't enough. So I guess my question is how do we get to our top 2 people in the rec program to gain a recognition of the complexity of this and to start some sort of training in that way? Because as you said, the training, and I think this highlighted it was not the volunteer that got in trouble, but not the main staff person. It really doesn't matter who did it, but the training is going to be big.
So it's I think that from my understanding, again, I'm not as close to, we got some other focuses going on, so the rec center is a little bit independent at the moment, but my understanding from discussions with John on this subject is the Recreation Directors Association type, trade group per se. There's a group of professionals in this business have gotten together, and this is becoming a more apparent issue that they are now discussing and is now is kind of bubbling up, across the board. There still continues to be, even though in the last time this came up, this was a concern and was voiced and is very much still a concern, is the ability to share conversations and information is still very sensitive between the town and the school, just because of things that they need to abide by. And that relationship is becoming that the issues between the two and how to kind of, dance and without stepping on each other's shoes, I think is getting a little smoother. I did send that to Christine and she did read it. And, we have had certain conversations outside of that pertaining to other things that have arisen, so there's been some cross discussions on behavior as in general. Due to some of the feedback that I got from the board, we have discussed with Christine a little bit. They are doing basically some childhood trauma, kind of work with their staff and, a child psychologist that is coming in to kind of work with them. They seem to be open to incorporating John and Joe, although that wouldn't start until maybe summertime, maybe late summertime, as they're still kind of formulating that program. So again, the interesting thing here is we're behind. I think that, again, I don't think that we're quite in tune with, child behavior, but, the school is kind of grappling with some of the stuff as well. So, I think it is something that we're going to have to increasingly focus on and make that a little bit more of a priority than just making sure they have refs.
I think it's interesting that Waterbury incident, the child had been through a number of foster homes.
Correct. Before.
And the current parents were doing it and had tremendous empathy for the child's issues, probably to the point of not being very rational about how they behaved themselves in getting him into the program. And so there's no place to blame anybody for anything there, because it requires an awful lot of understanding from everyone.
John and Joe have gotten some training.
What kind of training?
Well, they've gotten some through, there was a couple seminars that popped up, at least one that popped up on childhood trauma. We've also sat down with the legal team and have discussed the steps that we need to do to properly, vet and ask these questions and try to extract the questions and be a working team with the parent where, it's just, I think that in the past has been, there was an literally kind of a lot like, where we've been, it was just kind of, there was an assumption that, the school would notify us if there was any kind of help that was needed, and there was kind of a, if anything that we needed to be aware of, we'd hear from the school. And we now know that that certainly is not what we should expect, and certainly is not the new normal whatsoever. So I think that there has been some change in how we're starting to look at this.
Sarah?
Sarah, yes.
I'd just like to add a couple of things. comment on this latest discussion. As Hartland may feel as if it's behind the 8 ball on some of this, the fact is that every community is facing this at this point. And while there are a few communities that may be a little bit ahead, Hartland's about where the majority of communities are on this issue of figuring out how to be more responsive to the social and emotional development of children, to the issues of the vulnerability in families. One of the positive things that's going on right now is that the community health needs assessment that was being done by all of the hospital service areas around here came up with this issue that's about strengthening families as a high priority. And that certainly was only 4 areas for Mount Escutney, and Hartland is right smack in the center of that. And a set of initiatives about how to think about strengthening the communities is beginning with a series of nested meetings for people who will be leaders in the work, and then pulling in other people. So that whole cycle starts next week, and will start to be spinning out to the community in layers over the next 3 months. And so I know that there'll be some dialogue, bringing some ideas to the town itself as well as to the school about ways that people can all be helping each other to get stronger in this domain. So it's not something where the town is alone, where the select board is alone, where the rec department is alone. There will be a broader conversation that I think will be helpful, and resources to go with it.
Resources important, I think.
Yeah.
I think that,
Can anyone speak to, tell me a little bit about what the film that's scheduled for Friday night resilience? What is the topic?
Resilience is a 1-hour documentary that focuses on the brain science that went on, the study of the brain that went on, that started to identify trauma as really the fundamental, and the things that were happening in people's brains when they had traumatic experiences, and then identifying what the nature of traumatic, what's traumatic. You know, we tend to think of war and natural disasters and things as traumatic, but there are other things much more closer into our daily lives that are the traumatic pieces. And when they happen to young children, then they set a lifelong path in the brain. And then the second half of the hour is looking at some strategies that can help people to counterbalance that. And that's why it's called resilience. It's about how do you not have your whole life be controlled by the trauma. And I've been asked, Phil, that was sort of a setup question, I feel, because he knows that I've been asked to facilitate the conversation that comes after the half an hour that comes after the showing of the film. And we're hoping to have a couple of people who've been doing some work on the resilience part of it in some other towns be able to give a couple of 5-minute presentations on that.
Thank you. Okay, move along. Does anybody else have anything?
just the executive session.
I don't have anything public. No questions. Nothing's going to talk about anything. Okay, I guess we're done. The meeting is over. Oh, yes, well, wait a minute. We gotta go into executive session. Don't turn us off quite yet. Excuse me. We have
All right. I move that premature general knowledge would clearly place the town at a substantial advantage.
There's 2 parts to that. Yeah.
So it's 2 motions.
2 motions.
What's the second one?
Well, you need the second.
Oh, I second.
is that,
We all,
good with that motion?
good night. Thank you. I make the motion, second motion, to enter executive session to discuss the issue of a pending legal matter under the provision of Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statute.
13A7.
Oh, that's not a one, that's a seven.
Yeah, it's the 13A7.
313A7.
No, the legal matter is a mistake, so it's just 13A7.
I second that motion.
Is everybody good with that?
Yes.
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 Sorry, we're so awkward. This executive session stuff, but that's it. Thank you.